Everyone says it's normal for houses to creak at night. Please learn from the worst mistake of my life. The pounding on my window jolted me awake, my heart already pounding enough to hurt my chest. Someone was outside my house. I slipped out of bed without turning on the lights, terrified of alerting them to my movement. Very quietly, I grabbed my phone, then slipped out of my bedroom and into the living room, where the moon shone clearly through the glass. A fresh, clear, human handprint had been left on the other side of the window. The intruder had obviously been there just moments before, ducking out of sight right before I could catch a glimpse. I forced myself to cry silently as I raised a shaking hand, grabbing the curtain's cord and pulled. The sound gave me away. A hand slammed against the window, but the curtain had plunged the room into darkness. I couldn't see what was on the other side. Silently, I backed away. I moved quietly around the furniture, trying to put as much space as possible between the intruder and myself. Shit, had I locked the back door? I turned around and sprinted into the next room. The moonlight was bright enough to make the back door quite visible. Two things were very clear. The first is that I had remembered to lock the deadbolt. The second is that the deadbolt was the only thing protecting me, because I'd forgotten the lock and the knob itself. Someone was turning it from the other side, slowly but forcefully trying to push the door open. I slinked over to the door as quickly as I could without making any noise. By the time I reached the opposite wall, my hands were shaking so badly that I didn't know if I'd be able to operate the lock. I reached out my trembling fingers, touched the knob, closed my eyes, and clicked it into place. Then I jumped back like my hand had been burned. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the intruder got angry. They must have been hurling their entire body at the door, shaking the whole frame. I turned and ran into my bedroom, diving under the covers. I tried to catch my breath. I couldn't catch my breath. Two of them were outside my house. For the moment, they couldn't get inside. I glanced around my darkened bedroom, wishing that I'd pulled down every curtain, or at least that the moon wasn't so bright, because it would have spared the visual of my mattress sagging just slightly. My sheets rolled toward the edge as I froze, transfixed. A finger crawled over the corner of my mattress. I couldn't move. A second finger followed, then a third, and finally a whole hand. It inched toward me like a spider, prodding the space ahead for vulnerable flesh. I was already curled up in the farthest possible corner. There was no retreat left to take. The hand moved forward at an angle that forced me to accept what I'd been denying. Someone was under my bed, and their hand was pale blue. The chill down my spine grew more and more intrusive before I finally realized that something was tickling the back of my neck. I whipped my head around. A blue, wiggly finger with a dirty, broken nail was now poking around the opposite side of the mattress, proving that the intruder's arms were spread impossibly wide. Panic overwhelmed me. I sprang out of bed, the strong fingertips pinching my thighs and ass as I tumbled forward. I caught my balance while running and barreled out the bedroom door. I consciously avoided looking anywhere but straight ahead while racing through the living room and into the hallway. I screeched to a halt just below the attic access, leaping for the cord as a loud groan bellowed from my bedroom. I missed the cord. Something was moving into the living room. I jumped again. I missed again. They were following my path into the hall. I leapt for the cord once more, falling short by a laughably wide margin. They wanted to drive me out the front door, undoubtedly into the arms of the intruders waiting outside. I focused, moved, and reached one more time, nabbing the cord and pulling down the foldable ladder with all my body weight. It was just behind me at the end of the hall, but I knew better than to look. I was halfway up the ladder before it took another step. I popped into the attic, rolled over, and reached down to pull the ladder up behind me. It didn't move. The intruder had grabbed the lower rungs and was pulling back. I nearly threw up. Instinct moved faster than conscious could. I had grabbed the heavy storage box and moved it to the opening before stopping to think. I had just enough time to read books from 1913 Hill Street, written on the side before pushing the box over the edge. The books were heavy enough to knock the intruder aside. I quickly pulled up the ladder, closed the hatch, and retreated to the darkest corner of my attic. That's when the pacing began, up and down the hall, over and over, while I shiver in the darkness with no idea what comes next, because even the best laid plans can go awry in the strangest of ways. I'd followed the Morivavan family for weeks before moving on them. They weren't supposed to come home while I broke into their house. I'd almost made it out when they returned early. What options do you have once someone has seen your face? I killed their little boy first so that he wouldn't have to watch his parents die. See, I'm not a total monster. I finished his parents quickly, with minimal physical suffering. It was unfortunate, but straightforward. At least, it had been until they crawled out of the ground and began stalking me, and that is much, much more problematic than it sounds. How do you stop someone you've already killed? Obviously, I can't tell the cops what's happening. Even if they believed me, there's nothing they could do to help. I just rot in a jail cell, waiting for them to come. Because they always find me, no matter where I go. They haven't caught me yet, but I'm running out of options. I don't know what they intend to do to me, but there's a 100% chance it won't be something nice. And now, I'm stuck in my attic with no plan and no hope as they pace ceaselessly below me. I guess I'm getting what I deserve. I'm a coroner who just left my shift early. 2021 is off to a horrifying start. Fuck me. Oh, fuck me. I'm shaking as I type this. Who wouldn't be? And I have no one else to share this with. I'll never admit this to family members, and I'll lie if any colleague ever suggests that I wrote this. I've destroyed all the evidence. So you fine folks will be the only ones who ever hear what happened, because I need to get this off my chest. Here it goes. I'm a county coroner. I won't say where, other than the fact that it's somewhere in New York State. Earlier tonight, I was working alone. A Jane Doe was brought in at 7:13 p.m., and I started the examination shortly after. She'd died of a heroin overdose around 48 hours earlier. The body was in pretty bad shape after having been left in the elements for 2 days. I'd just begun the since destroyed recording when things went sideways. Shit. Look, I don't get spooked easily. You can't survive in this job if being alone with corpses gives you the willies. If someone earns a living by harvesting bovine semen, I'll assume they know their way around a bull dick well enough not to be intimidated by the damn thing. Same situation with me. So when Jane Doe moaned, I looked for a mundane explanation. I reasoned that it was just gas escaping her chest. I went back to work. When she started moaning words to me, every hair on my neck stood erect while my butthole sealed itself shut. "Hell," she whispered. The mundane explanation at this point was that a dead woman was talking to me because nothing else made a goddamn shred of sense. I couldn't check her vitals because I was running a morgue. People don't come into a morgue to improve their fucking vital signs. Beyond that, she was displaying livor mortis, rigor mortis, and decomposition. Those things are all very strong indications of death. Help me. She was groaning without moving her lips, but the sound was definitely coming from her mouth. My head swam. I grabbed a scalpel. But what the fuck do you do to someone who's already dead? Kill them again? Her shoulders rolled. "Please," she wheezed. Then her body rocked slowly back and forth. I wanted to shit my organs hard enough to slip into sweet unconsciousness, but ironically enough, the dead person in the room was having more success in spontaneous movement than the living one was. The only thing that seemed to free me was curiosity. Was that a good idea? Of course it wasn't a good idea. Curiosity killed the cat, and it turns out that it also fucks a mortician's psyche so badly that he'll end up wanting to freeze his own shit into poopsicles that he can sharpen into weapons to gouge his own eyes out if that's the price of never seeing a twitching cadaver again. I reached out and grabbed her arm. It was room temperature and had the consistency of rotten banana skin with soft pulp rolling just beneath the surface. With a firm tug, I rolled her over. Her back was wrong. Livor mortis always allows for discoloration. But what I saw looked stranger than body fluid pooling. She had a small mountain on her back. It was an angry red at the base, but it tapered into a snowy white cap that protruded 6 inches from her spine. My hand, still clutching the scalpel, moved of its own accord. I touched the tip of the blade to the peak of her back behemoth. Eruption. The force knocked the instrument from my fingertips. Instantly, my hand, her back, the gurney, the wall, my clothes, and even parts of the ceiling were coated in a layer of pus. It looked like the set of a snowy Christmas movie. Her back ejaculations slowed to a steady stream, the pus now cascading like thick, rich shaving cream on a continuous release. I have never, ever seen a fraction of that much pus in anyone, living or dead. The sheer volume would have put the most well-hung elephant to shame. I puked a little, the soured chunks colliding with the backs of my incisors. Jane Doe sighed. "Please finish," she eked out. I looked down at her mountain to see that it was now half empty. Curiosity. Fuck you, curiosity. I pressed hard against her back, feeling the banana mush give way to my intruding finger. But this time, with the hole on her back already wide open, the secret had a way out. When I was a kid, I once collected 10,000 pennies in a plastic container. After dropping it on the floor, the coins raced out in a tidal surge of freedom, scattering to every available corner of the room. The maggots did that now. There were so many that it seemed impossible for them to find enough space. I clapped my hand on my mouth in shock. Then I spat out the maggots I'd accidentally transported from my hand to my tongue. Extracting the tiny worms from my mustache was more difficult. I prayed that none had snuck inside of my head. The festering pile of maggots squirmed in the leaking pool of pus, blood, and death juices coiling and uncoiling in the Luciferian stew. I don't know what it would smell like if a hippopotamus ate its own shit and shit it out a second time before pissing on it, but there's no way that this stench was any less vile. I wanted to leave, but I couldn't move. I was powerless to peel my eyes away from the white-on-white horror show that was unfolding below me. Something cold touched my fingers. It was Jane Doe's hand. "Thank you," she whispered, one eye looking at me and the other already rotting into a jelly blob. Then all was still. The only sound to challenge the silence was the soft, delicate lapping noise of dying maggots splashing in frothy, bloody pus. Jane Doe, the larva, and all her paperwork went into the incinerator. I went home, made a proper vomit, and typed this. "You wish you hadn't read this? I have no sympathy for you. My situation is much, much worse. I just sneezed a maggot out of my nostril. It was still alive." Thanks for listening. If you enjoy these stories, be sure to subscribe to the podcast and check out some more of my episodes here.